Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever and wherever you're watching or listening. This is the Stochastic NHL DFS Strategy Show, and I am your host, Michael Clifford. Obviously, going solo again here today. Anybody that hasn't been around this week, Josh is dealing with some family stuff, so he is not here today. Just going through the slate here by myself. Once again, I appreciate everybody tuning in and having some patience with us. Of course, we've had some, there's been some site issues as well, just accessing everything. Again, if you're a Stochastic member, all the NHL data has been posted in the Discord, whether it's DraftKings or FanDuel, top stacks, player projections, goalie projections, ownership, all that uploaded to the Discord where you can go and download all the data that you need. They're still trying to figure out the things on the back end. Our poor developers have had their hands full over the last few days. Hopefully that gets resolved quickly. 9-game slate ahead of us here tonight. Not a big night in the NHL last night. There's only a pair of games, but obviously there was quite a bit of news. Edmonton and Pittsburgh made that goalie trade. Tristan Jarry going to the Oilers. He'll be starting tonight for Edmonton. Stuart Skinner and Brett Kulak going to Pittsburgh. I don't know if anybody's seen that meme of the father having a plaid shirt on and then getting the exact same plaid shirt for Christmas, but that's pretty much the Jarry for Skinner trade. I mean, listen, Jarry's had some injury issues. If you can get those cleaned up, maybe he'll be a different goalie than he's shown. You know, he's had a good season, but there was obviously some rough stretches over the previous few years. I don't see a whole lot of daylight between them, but goalies are goalies. Anybody can go on a hot streak for 3 or 4 months. Any goalie that's close to NHL caliber can do that. So, we'll see what happens. And then, the big seismic trade, Quinn Hughes traded from Vancouver to Minnesota. We saw Marco Rossi, Zeev Buium, Liam Ogren, and a first-round pick going back to Vancouver. It's pretty well known, the worst kept secret in the world, that Hughes wasn't going to be re-signing with the Canucks. The Canucks don't seem like they're playoff bound this year. May as well get as much as you can for him now. It's a pretty good haul. I mean, there's no guarantee that Quinn Hughes resigns with Minnesota. The Wild might only have him for the next season and a half. So, the trade upside was kind of limited, but Marco Rossi is a legitimate second line center in the NHL. Zeev Buium, still one of the best prospect defensemen in the league. I mentioned it today on social media. I know some of Buium's, play driving metrics don't look too good in the first 30 games of his NHL career. I'd also say that his most common defense partner has been Zach Bogosian. So, give him a little bit of a break. This is still an elite defense prospect. So the Canucks get to load up a little bit. Minnesota gets, however you look at it, you might consider him the best defenseman. He's certainly in the top 3, probably the top 2 in the world. So instantly makes Minnesota, I think a legitimate cup contender. I do think the Wild are going to go out and go get another center. They're not going to go into the playoffs with Danila Yurov. It's one of their top 2 centers. They're going to go get a center somewhere. When they do, they're really looking like a dangerous team now that they have Hughes on the blue line. And then an injury last night. Chicago and St. Louis are playing very, very end of the game, face off with like 1 second left or whatever. Connor Bedard took a cross check from Braden Shen off the face off. I mean, it was a cross check, a legitimate cross check, but you see 30 of those in a game and nothing happens. And it looked like whether it was his bicep or whether it was his shoulder or something, Bedard looked fairly injured. He looked like he was in a lot of pain coming off the ice. Not good news to have, potential multiple shoulder injuries at his age. He's not playing tonight. Chicago is on the slate. They called up Nick Lardis. We'll get to that when we get to it. But yeah, a lot of news for what was a 2-game Friday slate. But we have a 9-game slate here on this Saturday. Again, as Clayton said earlier, the NHL stats are on Data Hub. All the CSVs are in Discord, so if you're a Stochastic member, you should have access to those now. Let's just jump right into it. We have 9 games to get through, so let's get through these one by one. Again, I'm using implied goal totals from Fantasy Labs. I find they tend to be a little bit higher than what we normally use. We usually use implied goal totals from Pinnacle, but today it's from Fantasy Labs. So let's get right to it. We have the Vegas Golden Knights with a 3.6 total. They're going into Columbus. Columbus has a 3.1 total. Looks like Carter Hart going for Vegas, Chet Greaves going for Columbus. Columbus looking like they're going to run back the same lineup that they had, or the lineup that they had in practice yesterday, which was Boone Jenner, Adam Fantilli, and Kirill Marchenko top line. Second line of Dmitry Voronkov, Sean Monahan, and Isaac Lundestrom. Poor Kent Johnson and Yegor Chinnikov. Let's start on the Columbus side here. Columbus, their top line, with Fantilli and Marchenko, I was looking at their time together over the last couple of years without Dmitry Voronkov, because he has been their most common winger whenever they do play together. But without Voronkov, 59 shot attempts for, 71 against per 60 minutes and 120 minutes together at 5-on-5. 2.5 expected goals for, 3.3 against. Those are not good play driving numbers. We're still, you still get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit between Voronkov and Marchenko. Fantilli has 31 shots in his last 10 games. I think kind of importantly here, they're not used in a shutdown role, which means they're not used against the other team's top lines. They're going to be going up against like Vegas 2, Vegas 3. That's actually not a good thing here, because the Vegas top line, I was looking at their last 10 games, 63 shot attempts against, 2.7 expected goals against per 60, 3 actual goals against per 60 at 5-on-5. Those aren't good defensive numbers. Those are well below average. Going out against that line would actually have been a good matchup for Columbus's top line, but they're not. The other thing is, Vegas, Columbus doesn't draw a lot of power plays. They're at 2.4 per game. Over the last 5 weeks, it's a bottom 5 rate in the league. Vegas doesn't take a ton of penalties. They're also at 2.4 times shorthanded per game. It's the 4th lowest rate in the league. I do really like, Marchenko and Fantilli in general. That line isn't expensive, $15,600. It's a mid-price line that you can get to. I think they're okay, but like I said, Vegas doesn't take many penalties. The Vegas penalty kill in general has been good. The Columbus power play has been fine, but they're riding a 27% shooting percentage, which is really high. Like even like around 20%, it's like, you'd be amongst the top in the league, non-Edmonton Oilers division. 27% feels like they're overcooking a little bit. It's not a bad total with a 3.1 at 15,600. It's hard to complain, but they're not perfectly correlated anymore. And we don't really know how they're going to mix in with Boone Jenner. I don't mind Columbus one. I think, you can play him if you want. I'm probably not going to. The Columbus second line, I was looking at Sean Monahan in his time without Kirill Marchenko over the last 2 years. 61 shot attempts against, 3.2 expected goals against, like pretty bad defensive numbers. Monahan does have 8 points in his last 10 games. Like, they're playable. I'm going to be honest. This isn't a game where I'm super high on Columbus. It's one of those things, like, if anything, and I'm not a super big fan of playing third lines on slates this small. But Miles Wood, Charlie Coyle, and Cole Sillinger down on the third line, they're super cheap. Right? They're $8,300. You can just do like a Coyle Wood 2-man or whatever, but they're used in the shutdown role. They're going to be going out against that Jack Eichel line. I think it's a pretty good matchup for that Columbus third line, at least offensively. We do have some fairly big, big names, big boys on the slate. We have, Edmonton going into Toronto. We have Colorado at home. We have Dallas at home. There are spots where you might want to use a couple guys that are around 3K or less. I think one of them that you can use is that a couple parts from that Columbus third line. Like those guys get minutes, right? Charlie Coyle's, 1743 over his last 5 games. Cole Sillinger, 16 and a half minutes. Miles Wood, even like 14 minutes. That's not bad for a cheap price. If you want to use a couple of those guys to fit in your Colorados or your Edmontons or whatever, I think that's fine. That's where my interest is on Columbus. On the Vegas side, I mean, it's kind of the same thing that we always say. I'm not just playing the Vegas top line, with Jack Eichel being the lone guy on the power play on that line. Like one thing, Columbus just not a good defensive team, right? They've been one of the lesser defensive teams over the course of the season. I was looking at, just their last 20-ish games for every team in the league. Columbus bottom 5 by expected goals against in the league. Now, Jake Greaves starting instead of Elvis Merzlikins. Greaves has been the better goalie, but if you want to do, like I always say, the Eichel Stone Marner stack, I think that's where I would probably go in this game. It's not like Columbus takes a ton of penalties, but that Vegas power play has been very, very good. It's a very good power play matchup. Like the Columbus penalty kill, typically bottom 10 in the league, basically all season, no matter if you look at the last 5 weeks or the entire year or whatever. Vegas does, pretty sizable favorite in a game with a 6.5 total. So for me, it's going back to that Eichel, Marner, Stone 3-man stack. If Marner, one thing I'll say about Marner is no, he hasn't lived up to his normal production heights. He's also assisting or getting a point, on something like 56% of the goals scored with him on the ice. He's been above 70% every season of his career and averaged 75% over the last 3 years. Like he should have 37, 38, 39 points instead of, I think he gets 29 points in 30 games or 30 points in 31 games, something like that. So I do think Marner's in for a much bigger second half once that regresses positively. So Eichel, Stone, Marner is where my real interest is in this game. And like I said, I don't mind a couple guys from Vegas or from Columbus 3. Brandon says, I don't like leaving Hurl off of Vegas PP. I mean, add him in. You know what I mean? I have no problem with that. You can just straight up Vegas power play stack, use them with, game stack with that Columbus third line on the other side and kind of be on your way. The Vegas outside of Eichel, every other Vegas player is between 4,400 and 5,400. So it's a very stackable power play. Even if you use Carter Hart in net and he's 8,100, you have 4,500 left for your 2 defensemen and your utility on average. So if you want a power play stack, just go right ahead. But I do like Eichel, Marner, and Stone. All right. Moving along to the next one. Montreal Canadiens, 2.6 total. They're going into New York. The New York Rangers have a 3.0 total. New-ish Rangers lines. Panarin, Zibanejad, Lafreniere. Second line of Sheary, Trocheck, and JT Miller. Igor Shesterkin starting for Montreal. As far as we know, Montreal is going to run back the same lines after that win in Pittsburgh of Suzuki, Caulfield, Bolduc, Kapanen, Slafkovsky, Ivan Demidov. Jacob Fowler looks like he's starting for Montreal. He had a really, really good debut game on Thursday night. I watched the whole game. It was one of those games where if Montembeault or Dobush were in net and had played like they'd had for most of the season so far, instead of Montreal being up 3-0 at the end of the second period, it's probably like a 3-2 or 3-3 game. He made 2 or 3 huge saves, including on the penalty kill, that kept Pittsburgh off the board long enough for Montreal to build up their lead. He looked really good, but it's just one game. You don't want to read too much into one game. Here's what I'll say about the Rangers. I was looking at the Rangers 5-on-5 numbers since Adam Fox got hurt. It's been 6 games now without Adam Fox. At 5-on-5, the team has a 46% shot attempt and expected goal share. That is pretty bad. Now, they played some good teams recently. They just played Chicago, which whatever. But before that, Vegas, Colorado, Ottawa, Dallas, Tampa Bay. That is a pretty brutal stretch of games. So I'm not going to read a whole lot into the 46% expected goal share, but it is notable that this was a team that through the first month of the season was near the top of the league by expected goal share. It had started sliding before the Fox injury and has gotten worse since. So it's a continuation of a trend, even if the recent schedule has been pretty tough. Now, the Rangers' top line was Zibanejad, Lafreniere, and Panarin. I was looking at their numbers specifically this year. 2.2 expected goals, 2.7 actual goals per 60 at 5-on-5. That isn't great. What I will say is that they're not going to be used in the shutdown role, right? They're like the Columbus top line. They don't get used against the other team's top lines, which means that Rangers top line is going to be going out against the Demidov line, which is getting rolled over. The Demidov line has like a 40% shot share, which is terrible. The third line, even with Jake Evans back in the lineup, like it's not going to be anything, good. So like, I don't know. I'm not too high on playing the Rangers without Fox. He's a guy that just really makes it happen at both ends of the ice. But that Rangers top line with Lafreniere now jumping onto the top power play unit, and he's cheap. He's only 3,800. That Rangers top line is 16,800. Perfectly correlated. Zibanejad and Panarin are probably going to play over 20 minutes. Zibanejad has 10 points in his last 10 games. Obviously, Panarin had that recent hot streak as well. Getting depth matchups against Montreal. Like, listen, I'd feel a lot better about playing the Rangers if they had Adam Fox in the lineup. But at 16,800 for a perfectly correlated top line where the two of the three forwards are probably going to play over 20 minutes and get great 5-on-5 matchups. Like, there are worse spots to spend 16,800. So I really don't mind Rangers one here. If you want to drop down to the second line, like I think you can, but listen, I'm not a huge Connor Sheary guy. JT Miller, I was looking at some of his tracking data earlier. It is pretty bad compared to even last year when he had taken a downturn in Vancouver. I do think Miller's going to start producing better over the final 50 whatever games than he has over the first 30 some games, but I don't think he's necessarily going to produce at like 100 point per 82 game rate the rest of the way or something like that. The tracking data just really doesn't support it. So for me, this is about the Rangers top line. I think they have a great 5-on-5 matchup. Montreal's penalty kill, not really that good. They're taking fewer penalties. The Rangers don't draw any power plays. They're at 1.9 per game over the last 5 weeks. It is by far the lowest rate in the league. It's nearly a full power play lower than the league average. So they may not get a ton of opportunities. They're on the season as a whole. They're drawing the fewest power play opportunities per game. But it is otherwise a pretty good power play matchup against what is a below average Montreal penalty kill. I think by penalty kill percentage, they're 25th or 26th in the league this season. And really good 5-on-5 matchups with a lot of ice time. I like Rangers 1 here. Again, you want to dip down to Rangers 2. Go with God, but that's not for me. For me, it's Rangers 1. On the Montreal side, Josh and I had talked about how the Montreal top line hadn't been really performing that well without Juraj Slafkovsky when they were first put together. However, I did look over Montreal's last 10 games. The Montreal top line over their last 10 games, 66 shot attempts, 3 expected goals per 60. That is it's not quite what they were with Slafkovsky, but it's still pretty good. And they're perfectly correlated on the power play. Montreal's doing that thing now where Cole Caulfield is playing both halves of the power play. At one point, it's Nick Suzuki. Now it's Cole Caulfield. So that's giving Caulfield like 19 to 20 minutes a game, including lots of power play time. Suzuki well over 20 minutes a game lately. Bolduc's averaged around 16 minutes over his last couple games, playing on the top line with power play time. So, again, without Adam Fox, I'm not as concerned against facing the Rangers. And it's not just, me kind of talking out of my ass here when you look at, or when we talk about Adam Fox, but if you look at Vladislav Gavrikov's numbers without Adam Fox on the ice this season, when Gavrikov has Fox as his partner, The Rangers are giving up 50 shot attempts per 60 minutes. That is really good defense. Without him, 62 shot attempts against per 60 minutes. The goals against, more than double. The expected goals against go up like 60%. It is not even close. I don't think it's all about Gavrikov. I think it's the fact that the Rangers don't have another defenseman to play with Gavrikov with Fox out. So this isn't as bad of a matchup for Montreal as it would have been 3 weeks ago. Facing Igor Shesterkin still sucks. Obviously, Shesterkin capable of absolutely stonewalling any team on any night. He is one of the best goalies, if not the best goalies in the world. They just faced Colorado and they only gave up 3 goals on 42 shots. So, at 16,600, I think Montreal 1 is firmly playable here, right? That top line, 5.9% top 2 stack, 3.9% ownership. So there's good positive leverage on them. I don't mind playing Montreal 1 year at the same price. I'd rather just go play the Rangers side. I do think both top lines are in play. I'm not in so much on the depth of either side. So for me, this is a game about the top lines. I prefer the Rangers, but I do think if you're playing 20 max or 150 or whatever it is, I do think you should at least consider Montreal 1 because this isn't a bad matchup for them. The only thing that's really concerning is Igor Shesterkin just straight up Igoring and keeping Montreal to like 1 goal on 27 shots or something like that. All right, moving along. Let's get to our next game. We have the Carolina Hurricanes with a 3.4 total. They're going into Philly. Philly has a 2.7 total. Looks like Sam Ersson is going to get the start for the Flyers. Carolina hasn't named a goalie yet. I can't imagine that they don't go back to Brandon Bussi. Now, Carolina is on a back-to-back. They play at home tomorrow against Philly, so maybe they say Bussi for tomorrow. Who knows? But Brandon Bussi has been off to an unbelievable start for them. Not like he's been stonewalling everybody. He only has a 9-10 save percentage, but he's won 10 out of his 11 starts, which is absolutely preposterous stuff. So we'll see where Carolina decides to go in net. He has been their best goalie of the season. But obviously with Sam Ersson starting, it's a pretty big downgrade in net for the Flyers. And I did notice that a bunch more money was coming in over Carolina over the last few hours once Ersson was named the starter. Can't really argue with that. Let's start on the Philly side. The Philly top line, the Flyers top line, with Travis Konechny there, has been pretty good offensively. And that's kind of important because Konechny has kind of struggled this year, hasn't been the guy that he was, over the previous few years. Maybe the slide started towards the end of last year, whatever. But that line is 14,300, and they're coming in with no ownership. No ownership, under 1%. Only a 2.2% top 2 stack, but at 14,300, 0.7% ownership share. 63 shot attempts, 3.8 expected goals per 60 in nearly 60 minutes together. Not a ton of ice time, but you do get Konechny and Zegras on the top power play unit. Those guys play around 19 minutes a game. Mentioned it on the show recently how Carolina's playing a lot more off the rush this year than they typically do, and it's been hurting their 5-on-5 defense. Like their 5-on-5 defense has been, I think it's the worst in like 6 or 7 years or something like that. The penalty kill for Carolina honestly hasn't been that good. Not like the Flyers power play has been anything special. They've only been good because they're shooting 43%. With Travis Sanheim, like half that rate, and I would think there's probably overcooking a little. So I do think the Flyers power play is set to cool off, but at 14,300 for sub 1% ownership, for a line that's been really good offensively, Zegras has been great this year. If you're 20 maxing or whatever, I think you do have to consider them. In a single entry, I still have a tough time getting to the Flyers on a 9-game slate. Then the upside is like, this isn't what chalky Flyers, right? This isn't like 2.2% top 2 stack and 9% ownership. Like there's not, like nobody's playing the Flyers here tonight. And I'm not high on them generally speaking, but like I said, that top line's been good offensively. 2 out of the 3 on the top power play unit, 19 minutes a game for Zegras and Konechny or thereabouts. I do think there's some merit to playing them if you're playing a bunch of lineups here tonight. You want to dip down to Philly too at 13K, more of a filler type stack. They've been fine in their limited minutes. They get the third and fourth line matchups, which I think are the best matchups against Carolina. But I want to get the guys that are going to get the minutes, and that's Konechny, Zegras, and Dvorak. But again, I think for me, that's more like 20 max and above rather than single entry. Question is what to do on the Carolina side. The Carolina top line still perfectly correlated, even though they're doing that thing with Jordan Staal, where he's starting the power play, and sometimes Jackson Blake is hopping on. But that Carolina top line, you want to talk about no ownership. 0.7% ownership share, 7% top two stack, and they've come down in price. Remember, this is a line that was between like 20,300 and like 21K for a couple weeks. Now they're under 20K. It's not a huge savings, but if you can save $500, $600, $800, could get you a much better defenseman or a quote upgrade in net, whatever that is. I don't mind Carolina 1 here for the simple fact that they're facing Sam Ersson. If it was Dan Vladar starting, I would probably be out on Carolina entirely. But the fact is they're cheaper. They are looking like sub 1% ownership. And it's not like, listen, the Flyers, have been fine defensively this year, but not like a wagon defensively, right? Like I was looking over their last 20 games, basically middle of the league by expected goals against per 60. We're talking like St. Louis, New Jersey, Edmonton territory, like not bad, but this isn't like facing Los Angeles or Vegas or something like that. The Philly penalty kill, bottom 8 by goals against and worse than league average by expected goals against over the last 20 games. So the penalty kill hasn't been that great. Carolina does draw a fair amount of power play opportunities. There are some expensive lines to use here tonight. We'll get through them when we get to them, but there's Colorado, Edmonton, there's this Carolina line and Toronto. This line has the lowest ownership out of all of them. So if you want a high upside, low ownership line in a 20 max or something like that, I think this is where you can go. If you want to dip down to Carolina too, I have no issue with that. They don't have that much ownership either, coming in around 5.8%. They're 13,400. Don't get a ton of ice time, maybe around 16 minutes. Blake's been getting more now that he's getting some top power play time. But for me, this is about Carolina 1. I want the perfectly correlated line in a good power play matchup that nobody's playing. If you don't want to pay up for super expensive Colorado, maybe you don't want to play Toronto, which I certainly understand. I think Carolina is a nice pivot here. Going up against Sam Ersson does not scare me whatsoever. It shouldn't scare anyone. I know Ersson's had a couple good games this year, but he's made 10 starts. And in those 10 starts, he's given up at least 3 goals in 7 of them. He hasn't given up fewer than 2 yet. In fact, he's given up 4 or more as often as he's given up 2 or fewer. And this is with a, solid defensive Flyers team. So I don't mind Carolina 1 here. So Carolina 1, Philly 1 for me. Eric asking, is anybody else having trouble logging into Stochastic? Yeah, that's been having site issues for the last couple of days. Mentioned earlier, if you go to the data hub, all the NHL data is there. If you're in the Discord, the data has been posted to CSVs you can download in the Discord. They're trying to get the site back up. It's just something that the developers have been working through for a few days now. We'll let everybody know when it's back up and running as normal, but I have no idea when that's going to be. That's just way above my pay grade. All right, let's move along. Edmonton Oilers, 3.4 total. They're going into Toronto. Toronto Maple Leafs have a 3.2 total. Edmonton, they are starting Tristan Jarry. Like I said, I think he's a pretty similar goalie to Stuart Skinner, so that doesn't change much for me. On the Toronto side, probably Dennis Hildeby back in net. William Nylander played on the third line in the last game. Wasn't out for morning skate today, and they said he's a game time decision with an illness. Not like Nylander has been great lately, but if you take Nylander out of that lineup with a power play that's already struggled this year, the Toronto top line with Max Domi there is you losing the shot share battle, getting crushed by expected goals against. You take out Nylander from the second line, they might be fine defensively, but I don't think they're obviously going to be anywhere where they were offensively. Listen, we have to see what the status is with Nylander. Like, if he's out, I'm definitely not playing anything past the Toronto top line. The Toronto top line, Matthews, Knies, and Domi, 18,500. They are one of the four stacks on the board here tonight, priced above 17,500. 9.8% top two stack, perfectly fine with a half ownership, about half that rate. So playable here, but not really doing a whole lot. Over 90 minutes together with Max Domi on that line. 56 shot attempts, 2.8 expected goals per 60. Max Domi only has 14 shots in his last 10 games. He's not scoring at all. So you're banking on him at least getting a couple power play points, or a couple points, sorry. And you can do that against Edmonton. Obviously, their goaltending hasn't been great this year. The penalty kill hasn't been too stellar this year. But if Nylander is out, like I mean, I don't have a ton of excuse me. Almost started choking on my words there talking about the Leafs. Wouldn't be the first time. The reason I don't have interest in the Leafs is because for $2,000 more, I can go play Edmonton, who are facing the Leafs. Or for $1,200 more, I can go play Carolina top line. That is getting absolutely no ownership. Like, I just think there are better options in that price range that I would rather go play than Toronto here. So honestly, even with Nylander in, I don't think I really have any interest in the Leafs. The power play has been terrible. They're not drawing many power play opportunities. Edmonton's top line, small sample, but they've been great defensively. 42 shot attempts against, 1.6 expected goals against per 60 in nearly 50 minutes together. So, like, I don't know. I don't think it's really a spot where I want to go towards the Leafs. Like, similar ownership as Edmonton, I'll just go play Edmonton. And if I want to get, absolutely no ownership, I'll just go play Carolina. And, I think those lines are as good, if not better than Toronto, and they're perfectly correlated. So I'm out on Toronto. The question is what to do with Edmonton, I think. Edmonton's power play has been exceptional this year. They just don't get a ton of power play opportunities. 2.4 per game over the last 5 weeks. It's the third lowest rate in the league. If I'm not mistaken, on the road this year, they have the lowest rate of power play opportunities per game at 2.0. Here's the thing. The Toronto penalty kill is bad enough that if Edmonton gets 2 power plays, they can go 2 for 2. Because the Edmonton power play is that good and the Toronto penalty kill is that bad. Listen, the Leafs have a .907 penalty kill save percentage over the last 5 weeks, which is keeping their goals against around the middle of the league. But all the other metrics that we look at, shot attempts, shots against, expected goals against on the penalty kill over the last 5 weeks, Toronto's in the bottom 3 of the league. By far dead last by expected goals against, third most shot attempts against, most shots against per 60 on the penalty kill. So if the goaltending doesn't put up 900 plus save percentage on the penalty kill, this PK is going to get shredded by what is, if not the best power play in the league, certainly in the top 3. So Edmonton's top line is 20,500. They are perfectly correlated on the power play. 14% top 2 stack, 6.8% ownership share. Maybe they come up to like 10% in some single entry stuff, 11, even like 11, 12. I really don't care. They're going to be matched up against the Toronto top line. I don't know if anybody's looked at the Matthews line defensively with Domi on it. I don't think anybody will be surprised to know that a Max Domi top line in a shutdown role is getting steamrolled defensively. 64 shot attempts against, 3.5 expected goals against per 60. If Dennis Hildeby is not on his game tonight, this could be a long night for the Toronto top line. So I really do like Edmonton 1 here. I'd rather play them than Carolina. but I'd still rather play Carolina than Toronto. So, Edmonton and then Carolina and then Toronto. I think it's a great spot for the Edmonton top line. The Edmonton second line, 3.3 expected goals, 64 shot attempts per 60, with Podkolzin and Savoie flanking Leon Draisaitl. Now, obviously, it gets really expensive if you add in Draisaitl to the top line with Edmonton, but there are some third lines that we'll get to later on the slate. I already mentioned one in Columbus. I do think the Rangers third line it has something that's playable. Chicago without Bedard is going to have some cheap line combinations. Nashville going into Colorado, like Calgary. Like, I do think there are some really cheap spots that you can get to if you do want to add in Draisaitl, and because it is such a good power play spot for them, you might want to do that. But in general, for me, it is Edmonton one in this game. That is where my interest lies. Nothing for me from Toronto. All right, let's get to our next game here. Our next game is Washington with a 3.2 total. They're going into Winnipeg. Winnipeg has a 3.0 total. Washington looks like is going to be starting Logan Thompson in net. We don't have a confirmation on Winnipeg. If it's not Connor Hellebuyck. And what I will say, I didn't think they didn't commit to anything yesterday, but Connor Hellebuyck was at practice. I think he would be ahead of schedule if he returned tonight, but it is a possibility. At least I saw that Hellebuyck might start. I'm not expecting him to start. I still think it's going to be Eric Comrie. If this was a divisional game, that might be kind of a different situation. But Winnipeg plays at home on Monday, so maybe they just give Hellebuyck another day or two. But something to watch out for. Winnipeg top line. Now, Winnipeg had an optional skate today. They didn't confirm that they were going with the same lineup. And listen, Winnipeg started the season 12-7. Since then, they are 2-8-1. They've lost 5 of their last 6 games, including 3 in a row. I would not be surprised to see some more lineup changes. But at this point, until they get Hellebuyck back, it doesn't really matter. They can do all the lineup changing that they want, but the fact is that they have probably the best regular season goalie we've seen since Henrik Lundqvist. And then dropping down to whatever Eric Comrie might be, like a solid backup, is just a massive fall off a cliff. It just is what it is. And, Washington, kind of a tough matchup. Winnipeg's top line with Alex Iafallo has been good in a small sample, 3.5 expected goals per 60, 71 shot attempts per 60, but it's only been a handful of games. And Alex Iafallo was taken off the power play in the last game. Cole Perfidi was put back on. So it's not like the Winnipeg top line is perfectly correlated anymore. So, one thing we always say is that you kind of want to attack Washington on the penalty kill. If it's not a perfectly correlated line, like that kind of worries me a little bit. Maybe Winnipeg just goes right back to the loaded top line. They move Gabriel Velarde there. I mean, we'll see in warmups. Whatever it is, whatever the line combinations they go with, I'm not playing anything but Connor and Scheifele. Like, that is the line that's probably going to see a fair bit of the Alex Ovechkin matchup. The Alex Ovechkin line, whatever the iteration, has not been good defensively, whether it's been Connor McMichael, Anthony Beauvillier, doesn't matter. They're not that good defensively. So I do think Winnipeg top line can get there, but I just don't have a lot of faith in this team offensively. If it was Charlie Lindgren starting and not Logan Thompson, I would probably have some more interest. But with Logan Thompson in net, and it's not a perfectly correlated Winnipeg top line, at least as far as we know, probably just out on Winnipeg. My interest is more on the Washington side. Now, certainly does look like Connor McMichael will be back on the Washington top line as he was last game. Second line of Justin Sourdif, Tom Wilson, Alexei Protas. The Washington top line hasn't had great numbers with McMichael there, 2.3 expected goals per 60. Ovechkin does have 34 shots in his last 10 games, so obviously his shot volume is there. They're all playing around 18 to 19 minutes. 17,100 against a Winnipeg top line, with Alex Iafallo, has not been good defensively. If you look at, the mid-price stacks, let's call them, that Winnipeg top line kind of falls in the middle. That Washington top line kind of falls in the middle. 7.9% top two stack. Like at the top, you're looking at 10 to 12%. At the bottom, you're looking at 2 to 4%. These guys are around 8%. So, perfectly playable going up against the Winnipeg top line that's not been good defensively. Geez, something stuck in my throat here. Against the Winnipeg top line that has not been good defensively, against probably Eric Comrie, who has not been not been Connor Hellebuck. 2 out of 3 guys on the top power play. The power play has been considerably better without John Carlson and Jacob Chychrun both there. When it's just Chychrun, they're actually above league average. Winnipeg on the penalty kill has a save percentage under 700 over their last 16 games. That's 20% of the season with a save percentage on the penalty kill under 700. That is horrific. Should get better, but I think it kind of highlights what this team is and is not when Connor Hellebuck is missing. So for me, I do like Washington 1 here. I think, as one of those more mid-price stacks, they're firmly in play here. They're not getting a ton of ownership, under 5%. I'd rather play them than the Winnipeg side, certainly. We'll talk about the Detroit lines in a little bit. I would certainly rather play them than like Vegas or the Columbus top line or the Kings top line or, the Reinhardt line from Florida or something like that. So they're not at the top for me in that price range. There are a couple lines later that we'll get to that I have above them. Both Detroit lines have higher top 2 stacks. But I do think in like a 20 max or whatever, they're playable. If you want to dip down to the second line, I think that's perfectly fine. That Washington second line with Sourdif there has been fine, has been good, actually. I was looking at their last 10 games, 3.2 expected goals per 60, 59 shot attempts per 60. You get Wilson on the top power play unit. Protas playing around 19 minutes a game. I do think as a filler, Winnipeg 2 is very playable here. Washington 2, rather, is very playable here at around 3% top 2 stack, 3% ownership. You can fit him in with your Detroit stack. You could even fit him in with like Edmonton 1 or something like that. Not worried about any of the matchups on the Winnipeg side unless it's Connor Hellebuck starting. So I do think both Washington top 2 lines are my favorite lines in this game, but I prefer Washington 1 over Washington 2. But I think it kind of depends what you do with the rest of your lineup. Neither Washington line is my first line in. Let's put it that way. So, if I put in Edmonton 1 and I need a line under 14K, yeah, then I consider Washington 2. If I play Rangers 1 and I'm looking for another stack around the $17,000 price range, then I consider Washington 1. But they're not my primary focus on this slate. They're the second stack I put in. It all depends what I do with my first stack. All right, next game, Florida, 2.6 total going into Dallas. The Dallas Stars have a 3.0 total after what looked like could be a pretty brutal injury from Rope Hintz. It looks like he's actually going to be fine. He's just going to straight up be in the lineup tonight. That's certainly good news for the Stars. Good news for us on the slate, and I'll get to why in a second. He's going to be between Jason Robertson and Jamie Benn, Wyatt Johnston, Sam Steele, Mikko Rantanen on the quote second line. Here's why I think it's really good news that Hintz is back. That Dallas top line, I'll call them the top line. The Dallas line of Jason Robertson, Rope Hintz, Jamie Benn, 17,500, 6.2% top 2 stack, 4.3% ownership. So you get some decent leverage here. They're not super expensive. Obviously, this is why it's good news. They get used in the shutdown role. It's not Rantanen and Johnston that get used in the shutdown role. It is Hintz and Robertson and Benn. That is important in this matchup because they're going to be going out against the Sam Bennett line, I imagine. The Sam Bennett line, 3.7 expected goals against. That's Bennett, Verhaeghe, Marchand. Every single Marchand line has been really bad defensively this year. They've been really good offensively, so that's, they're kind of living with it, but really bad defensively. And that line for Dallas of Robertson, Hintz, and Ben, 62 shot attempts, 3.5 expected goals per 60 at 5-on-5. Not getting a ton of ice time, which is the concern here. But Dallas's power play is elite. Robertson and Hintz have been really good together for years. Florida about league average by time shorthanded per game, and I'm not worried about the penalty kill necessarily. Maybe the ice time is a concern, like Robertson around 19 minutes, Hintz around 17, Ben 14 to 15 if you're lucky. It's not really a ton of ice time, but it isn't like they're priced at like 20K or something either. 17,500 is very palatable for me. If you want to make it more of a power play stack, take out Ben, and I'd probably put in Wyatt Johnston. I think you can do that. But for me, I really like Dallas 1 because I think they're going to have a great 5-on-5 matchup. Much better than if they were matched up against the Reinhart line. So in a great 5-on-5 matchup in a solid power play spot, I really do like Dallas 1 here at 17,500. Listen, they're facing Sergei Bobrovsky. It's not as if Bobrovsky's been anything special this season, right? Bobrovsky's sitting with an .882 save percentage, 3 goals against per game. I do like the Hintz, Robertson, Ben line here. On the Florida side, I'm out on the Bennett line just because I think they go up against Lindell and Heiskanen for Dallas. That defense pair, we talk about it all the time, like one of the best defensive pairs in the NHL. Dallas has been very, very good on the penalty kill, generally speaking, this season. So it's not a great power play matchup for Florida. So a bad 5-on-5 matchup, not really a good power play matchup. It kind of takes me out of Florida 1. Florida 2 is a little interesting. The Reinhart, Lundell, Luosterainen line. I mentioned them because they're not that expensive. 14,800, 2.2% top 2 stack, 0.6% ownership. They're going to be going out against the Rantanen line, I imagine. The Rantanen line, 62 shot attempts against with Sam Steele there. That's not really that good defensively. I don't think they see very much of the Heiskanen and Lundell pairing. Once you get to the second and third pairs for Dallas, with the injuries they have, even if they've gotten Thomas Harley back, nowhere close defensively as with Lundell and Heiskanen. They've been good at 5-on-5. That Reinhart line, 67 shot attempts, 3.3 expected goals, 4 per 60. Even without top power play time, Anton Lundell has 28 shots in his last 10 games, so he's getting very involved offensively. The only problem I find with that line is at 14,800, it's an awkward pricing. It's right, like you can't really put them in with your Edmonton or your Colorado or whatever, and they're not like a true filler, that you might want to put in with Carolina or something like that. Like you can, but then you're probably close to double punting your defenseman. They're the line I would want to play. I'm not super stoked about playing any line from a Florida team with a 2.6 total. I'm more in on the Dallas side, and it's the Hintz, Robertson, Ben line for me. All right, let's get to our next one. Detroit Red Wings, 3.8 total. They're going into Chicago. Chicago has a 2.9 total. Obviously, Chicago is going to be without Connor Bedard. That has already been announced. They called up Nick Lardis. Nick Lardis, a solid prospect for them. I think 13 goals in 25 games or something like that in the AHL this year, shooting nearly 20%. So keep that in mind. We don't really have an idea of what the Chicago lines are going to be. Some projection sites like Daily Faceoff, you'll see Ryan Greed taking Bedard's spot as a center and then Ryan Donato moving up. I think that's possible because Green does take a lot of faceoffs, even when he plays on Bedard's wing. So just moving Green to center and then moving up like Donato or something from the fourth line, I think is fine. Maybe they just put Nick Lardis there. I guess we won't know until warmups. They did say Lardis is going to be on the power play. They didn't specify which one. I can't imagine it's going to be anything but Bedard's spot, but something to keep in mind. I think the bigger key for me here is that Spencer Knight started last night. So it's almost certainly going to be Arvid Soderblom in net for Chicago here tonight. Safe to say there's been a difference between the two of them. Spencer Knight legitimately one of the best goalies in the NHL so far this season. Evolving Hockey has him at 22 goals saved above expected in 22 games. Listen, when you're saving your team 1 goal per game, it's safe to say that you're having a really good season as a goalie. He's giving up 2.5 goals per game. Arvid Soderblom, meanwhile, negative 3.5 goals saved above expected in 9 games this season, costing his team a goal like every 3 starts. So, yes, quite a difference. He's giving up 3.9 goals against per game to, 1.4 more goals than Spencer Knight. Like Soderblom, I don't think he's quite this bad, but to me, he's like at his absolute best, he's a low-end starter in the league. Most likely he's just kind of like an average, maybe slightly above average backup. Compare that to a goalie who's been one of the best in the NHL this season. It is a massive, massive drop-off, especially when you look at the Blackhawks defensively. Over Chicago's last 20 games, 2.9 expected goals against per 60. It's the 3rd worst rate in the league at 5-on-5. Bottom 10 or top 10 by goals against, but only because of how well Spencer Knight has been playing. Without Spencer Knight, like this is the Logan Thompson to Charlie Lindgren or Andre Vasilevsky to Jonas Johansson drop off on steroids. Listen, maybe Soderblom goes out, has like a 33 save shutout. Goaltending is goaltending. It is widely variant from a day-to-day basis, but man, it is a huge drop off in net. And that is important for a couple reasons. One, Chicago's taking penalties. 3.1 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks, tied for the 7th highest rate in the league. That's going up against a Detroit power play that is getting 3.1 opportunities per game over the last 5 weeks, tied for a top 10 rate in the league. We know how good the Detroit power play has been. Now, Chicago has generally had a good penalty kill, but against a power play this good with a goalie this bad, I do think things are lining up pretty well for Detroit here. The Detroit top 2 lines are both priced similarly. They're within $1,100 of each other. Top 2 stacks, very similar as well. Probably going to be more ownership on that Detroit DeBrincat King Cop line just because they are $1,100 cheaper. This is a situation kind of like we always talk about with Emmett Finney. Like if you want to take out Finney, put in Kane or DeBrincat, make it more of a power play stack. I think that's fine in this matchup. Both lines have been very good. Like over the last 10 games for the Detroit top line with Larkin, Raymond, and Finney, 3.1 expected goals for. The Detroit second line with Andrew Kopp there is at 3.7 expected goals for. Both really, really, really good. That's why it's kind of hard. Like, do you take one or the other? I'm not worried about any of the 5-on-5 matchups coming back from the Chicago side. The top line with or without Bedard's not going to be good defensively. The Jason Dickinson line hasn't been as good defensively as they were last year. So I'm not worried about any of the 5-on-5 matchups. I usually default to Larkin, Raymond, and Finney just because they typically get more ice time. 19, maybe 20 minutes for Larkin and Raymond. You probably won't get that from DeBrincat, Kane, and Kopp. But if you want to dip down into Detroit too, I think that's fine. But for me, I always prefer Detroit 1 because I always go with a line that is likely going to play more minutes. On the Chicago side, this is tough because obviously Connor Bedard is a massive, massive hole in their offense that is missing. Nick Lardis might be a fine prospect. Obviously, he's nothing close to Connor Bedard. Chicago's probably due for a little bit of shooting percentage regression anyway. Detroit doesn't take a ton of penalties. I imagine Chicago's power play is going to be considerably worse now without Bedard in the lineup. We don't even really know what the lineup is going to look like for Chicago. Like, if you want to play Nazar, Bertuzzi, and Oliver Moore, like, I guess you can because Nazar is going to have to play a lot of minutes now, right? And I think that's the one thing that they probably have going for them is that at 13,100, probably going to get at least Bertuzzi, if not Bertuzzi and Nazar on the top power play unit. Low ownership, 2.5%, 13,100, priced as a filler. Nazar is probably going to have to play around 20 plus minutes. He's been playing 17, 18, sometimes 19 lately. He's going to have to play a lot of minutes. They just don't have any other centers. Maybe just Jason Dickinson picks up a few minutes or a couple minutes or something. But it's Nazar that I think is going to get the lion's share of the ice time. And listen, they've been fine. 51 shot attempts, 2.2 expected goals. But for me, on the Chicago side, this is a late start, 8 o'clock Eastern, so half the slate's going to be locked by the time they hit the ice for warm-up. We don't know what the lineup is going to look like. It's a back-to-back. I don't mind, if you want a one-off Nazar or if you want a one-off Donato or one-off Burakovsky, I think that's okay. As far as stacking goes, I have way more interest in the Detroit side than I do the Chicago side. Speaking of no interest, Nashville Predators, they're going into Colorado. Nashville has a 2.4 total. Colorado has a 4.3 total. Obviously, Colorado a massive favorite here tonight. Nashville kind of a nice little streak of late, right? 6-2 in their last 8 games. They have scored at least 3 goals in, I think, 6 of those 8 games. So, they do have some pretty good underlying metrics. That Nashville top line with Stamkos and Evangelista next to Ryan O'Reilly, 61 shot attempts, 3.7 expected goals per 60. Obviously, Stamkos coming off that 4-goal game, which when I was writing about that for season long, realizing that was only his second 4-goal game of his career, and the other one came a couple years ago. Think of all those 15, 60 goal seasons he had with Tampa Bay 10, 15 years ago, and he never had a 4-goal game until 2023. That seems kind of wild, but neither here nor there. They're going to be going out against Colorado 1. Interesting thing about Colorado 1, their last 10 games, the top line for Colorado, obviously their offensive numbers are still off the charts good. That's not in dispute here. But 62 shot attempts against, 3.3 expected goals against per 60 at 5-on-5. Those are fairly poor defensive numbers. They're truly trading chances. Now, they're wildly outscoring the opposition because, they create so much. They're just 3 insanely skilled players. They have way more skill in that line than anybody else does. But they are giving up a lot. And if it wasn't for 966 goaltending behind them, the goals against rates would be looking a lot worse. I'm not playing Nashville here tonight. What I am in my single entries, what I am saying is that top line is 12,500. Okay. To about a little over 2% projected ownership. Really good expected goals for numbers going up against a Colorado top line whose defensive numbers have been sliding. And the Nashville top line, they all play between 17 and 19 minutes. So 12,500 for a line that gets high teens in minutes at 2% ownership that is in a good 5-on-5 matchup. If you're 20 maxing, certainly if you're 150, I think they're a line you at least consider. Other than that, no interest in Nashville. Obviously, the interest lies on the Colorado side. That new Nashville top line has been good defensively. Not a big sample, though. 65 minutes, 49 shot attempts against per 60. Like I said, the Colorado top line still just supernova stuff offensively. Their last 10 games, 87 shot attempts, 4.1 expected goals for per 60. That Colorado top line, the number one top 2 stack on the night at 27.4%, nearly double what it is for Edmonton. 22,600, I think, is a very reasonable price for them. Now, the one concern is that Nashville's penalty kill top 10 metrics by shot attempts, shots against, and expected goals against on the penalty kill over the last 5 weeks. We know Colorado's power play hasn't been anywhere near as good as the rest of the team has been in basically every other area. But this is the top line on the night. This is a top line on the team with the highest total on the night at home, getting 20 to, McKinnon's getting 23 plus minutes. It's just a matter of whether you want to pay 22,600 for them. There are a lot of cheap spots. Like, we went over some one-offs from Chicago that I think you can put in. Went over some cheap guys from Columbus that you can put in. Like I said earlier, I think the Rangers third line might be something that you want to consider. I do think there are some cheap spots you can add in. Colorado's the top line on the board. I imagine Nathan McKinnon's going to carry a ton of ownership here tonight. Projected ownership on the board here. Number 1, Mackenzie Blackwood at 20%. Number 2, Cale Makar, 19%. Nathan McKinnon not far behind at 18%. So they're going to carry a lot of ownership. I think it's perfectly fine. It's a really good matchup for them with a huge total. Again, I typically don't play lines that expensive on slates this large. 9 games is kind of fine. It's more like the other night when we have 13 games where it's just a pass for me. 9-game slate, I think they're very playable. I haven't made my lineup yet. At 20, if this line was like 24,600, I think it'd be way more of a conversation for leaving them off at this point. With what they've done, all they need is one solid game on the power play, and they could absolutely nuke the slate. Colorado wants the top line on the board. It's just a matter of whether you want to play them at that price or not. You want to dip down in Colorado too? Listen, they're playable. 72 shot attempts, 4 expected goals per 60. Colton only playing about 13 minutes a game, but you get Landeskog and Nelson around 17 and 19. Colorado did change up their power play a bit last game. Like, I think they moved Valerie Nichushkin up for a power play. They moved Brock Nelson up for a power play. So, that is a little bit of a concern for me when it comes to playing the top line. But I think one way or another, you're going to get at least one guy from the second line on the top power play. So listen, they're playable, but for me, this is a Colorado one or bust game. It's just a matter of whether you want to play 22,600 for them. All right, let's finish off. Nashville is getting better. Like I said, 6-2 in their last 8 games. Their underlying metrics have improved quite a bit. I do think trading Spencer Stastny was kind of weird because he had some decent defensive metrics. Maybe that'll impact them. I mean, we'll see. Anyways, let's get to our final game. Calgary 2.5 total going to Los Angeles. Los Angeles 3.2 total. I'll be quick on the Flames. I repeat, I am not playing the Calgary Flames here tonight. On the road with a 2.5 total against a team that has been great defensively. It's not like they're super cheap. Like Backlund, Coleman, and Zari are cheap enough, I guess, at 10,200. If you want to do a 2-man of like Backlund and Coleman or something and put them in with like your Edmontons or whatever, I guess that's fine. But I'm not paying 13,400 for a Calgary line or 13,300 for a Calgary line in what is probably the worst matchup on the board here tonight. In a 2.5 total on a 9-game slate, there are just other spots with low ownership I'd rather get to. The question is whether you want to play anything from Los Angeles. The Kings going back with Alex Laferriere on the top line, Joel Armia on the second line. Armia is getting power play time now. A funny thing, that Fiala Byfield Armia line, 14,200, 5.2% top 2 stack, 7.7% ownership. Not quite a filler, but not super expensive either. Armia, like I said, has been getting top power play time for the Kings. So, him and Kevin Fiala on the top power play, you get 2 out of the 3 guys there. They're probably going to see either top line or second line matchups against Calgary, which is honestly the matchups that you want. You don't want them going out against the Backlund line. I don't think they're going to see that much against the Backlund line. I think they're going to see quite a bit, if not of the Morgan Frost line, then maybe the Nazem Kadri line. 14,200, 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play, playing 17.5 to 19.5 minutes. Perfectly fine for that price. 60 shot attempts, 3 expected goals per 60 and over 105 minutes together. Like, those are pretty good offensive numbers. Listen, it's not like the Kings power play has been that great. Calgary penalty kill hasn't been that good. They've relied on their goaltending. 936 penalty kill save percentage over the last 5 weeks. Great for the goalies. Bad, bad in the future, should regress in the future. Not great news for the team. So I honestly don't mind Fiala, Byfield, Armia here. I'd certainly rather play them than anything from Calgary, even at 10x the ownership. They're one of those lines you could fit in with, like Carolina or Detroit or something like that if you want to go in that direction. I much prefer them over Kempe, Kopitar, and Laferriere. I say that now, just basically locking in that Anze Kopitar hat trick. But for me, it's Fiala, Byfield, Armia. Honestly, if you want to leave Byfield off and just two-man it, I think you can do that. But for me, it's only Kings 2 that I really have interest from this game. This is a 5.5 total with two really good defensive teams. There's just not a lot for me to grab onto. All right, let's move along to defensemen. Top of the board here tonight for projections. You have Cale Makar, nearly 15 points. Zach Werenski, 13.5. Evan Bouchard, nearly 13. And then down from there. By point per dollar, Bouchard's number one. He's also number one on my board as well. Really, really, really good power play matchup against Detroit. So Bouchard and then Cale Makar at home against Nashville in a great spot. Zach Werenski, I don't mind him against Vegas. I think for me, it's like if I was 20 maxing and, I run the Sims or whatever, and, we don't have Sims, but if you have a personal optimizer or something, and Werenski pops up in one or two of your lineups, I think that's fine. I'd prefer paying the extra $400 for Makar or just dropping down $1,100 and going for Evan Bouchard. The mid-price range, there's honestly not a whole lot. Miro Heiskanen, I think, is fine. Again, at home against Florida. I can tell you I'm probably not going to play him here tonight. He's still got a lot of ice time in that last game, even with Thomas Harley back, 26 minutes. So he's playable. Shane Gostisbehere for Carolina, playable against Philly, but at 5,500, I think he's a bit overpriced. So there's not a lot in that just under 6K range that really interests me. Get under 5K. Edmonton has a couple playable defensemen in Matthias Ekholm and Darnell Nurse. I would lean Nurse just because I always lean the guy that puts up big peripherals, which is what Nurse has done this year, but both very playable. I think Shea Theodore is fine for Vegas, even without top power play time. The reason being, Columbus is a pretty poor defensive team. Shea Theodore's still great at even strength, can create by himself. If you want to drop down, save $800, play Noah Hannafin, I think that's fine. But Shea Theodore, Morgan Riley, I guess he's playable in the sense that he's been actually productive this year, and Edmonton's power play I don't think is anything to be feared. Problem is Edmonton's penalty kill is nothing to be feared. Problem is Toronto's power play is also nothing to be feared. So Riley, I guess, is playable, but I'd rather pay the extra 100. Go play Shea Theodore, save a bit of money, and go play Darnell Nurse. Under 4K, Thomas Harley under at 3,800. It's one of those things there's no way he's this price if he's playing as well as he was at this time a year ago, or even February, March, or April or anything. The problem is he just hasn't had a good start to the season, but it's tough to give up on him. Jake McCabe for Toronto is projecting extremely well. He's getting, I think, between 24 and 25 minutes of late because they've had, a few injuries on the blue line. He's had to play quite a bit. If you look at the defenseman priced under 4K on the board here tonight, Thomas Harley, number one, Jake McCabe, number two. So with a point per $1,000, 2.38, it would be one of the highest in that price range. So I certainly don't mind Jake McCabe here. Vladislav Gavrikov getting minutes without Adam Fox. Sean Walker still getting decent minutes for Carolina. Puts up good peripherals. Dylan Sandberg at 3K. Listen, not a great matchup, but with his minutes, with his skills, I think at 3K, he's perfectly fine. Ivan Provorov is projecting well. Don't love the matchup, but I think he's fine at 3,600. Braden Schneider's getting a lot of minutes for the Rangers, so if you don't want to play Gavrikov for whatever reason, I think Braden Schneider at 3K is perfectly fine. Under 3K, Nikita Nikishin for Carolina getting some power play time. Brady Shea still projecting well. One of those things, as long as he stays under 3K, he's always going to project well. Alex Carrier for Montreal. As long as he's under 3K, he's always in play. Alex Vlasic from Chicago. Don't really love Chicago without Connor Bedard, but as long as they keep going 12-6 and don't have 7 defensemen in the lineup, we're not expecting 7 defensemen for Chicago. I guess we'll find out at warmups, but as long as they only have 6 defensemen in the lineup, I think Alex Vlasic firmly in play. Thoughts on the blue line of Quinn with Faber? I'm going to be honest. I'll be really interested to see what they do with their defense pairs. I'm not super excited. Like I'm not a big fan of Brock Faber. I think he's kind of overrated. Quinn Hughes obviously can elevate absolutely anybody. I would love to see a Quinn Hughes Jonas Brodin pair or something like that, just to see, you get the great defensive play from Jonas Brodin, maybe frees up Quinn Hughes a little bit. I mean, we're going to find out. He can elevate anybody. Quinn Hughes can't be extended until the summer, so it's technically a 1.5 season rental. That's why I think the package is a little light. He has 1.5 seasons left. He can't extend a guy until he only has 1 season left, which means this summer for Hughes. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, everybody thinks he's going to New Jersey to play with his brothers. Very well could. Anyways, getting to goalies. The top projected goalie here tonight, Mackenzie Blackwood. I haven't seen any firm confirmations for Colorado. I think it's going to be Wedgwood. The projection wouldn't change much, whether it's Blackwood or Wedgwood. It would still be the number 1 projected goalie. So I think Wedgwood is at the top of the board. Darcy Kemper, I think, makes a ton of sense at home against Calgary. Maybe he gets lit up. Anything can happen in a single game, but I really don't think Darcy Kemper is a poor play. I think he's a solid play. And Jake Ottinger, number 3. Those are my top 3 as well. So if you're paying $7,900 or above, I think those are your 3 goalies. Probably Wedgwood, either Kemper. I think Ottinger is fine, but I would honestly be between Wedgwood and Darcy Kemper. If you're looking for a cheap goalie here tonight, I think my top of the board would be Jack Greaves. I know Eric Comrie's projected slightly higher overall here, but Jack Greaves has the higher point per dollar value, 7,300 at home against Vegas. He has been a pretty good goalie. Even if Columbus has been poor defensively. So I don't mind Greaves. Jacob Fowler is a bit of a risk, 7,200 on the road against the Rangers, but obviously the Rangers have had their issues scoring this year. And without Adam Fox, they may not be able to generate a ton of quality offense. If you need a punt goalie, I think, I would I'd rather play Jacob Fowler than Sam Urson at home against Carolina. Dustin Wolf on the road against Los Angeles would be the other one. Los Angeles, not necessarily a high-scoring team either. Calgary doesn't give up a ton of shots, which is the one concern for me. But, if Calgary wins this game, it's not going to be like a 7-5 game or something like that. I think if they win this game, it's like 3-1, maybe 4-2, and Wolf has a solid game. So for the cheap goalies, it goes Greaves, Fowler, and Dustin Wolf for me. Before we finish up, super chat from Clayton. It says, great job this week, Cliffy. Much appreciated. I mean, certainly appreciate your support, Clayton. Been in Stochastic member for years. It seems like he pulls out a nice bank in single entry or three or five max or whatever every like once a month, and it's always helping out some questions from other people. Really appreciate you, Clayton. Obviously some things going on behind the scenes this week that has made this a bit of a weird week, but we're here to do what we do, which is try to help people make their DFS lineups. I certainly appreciate everybody having their patience with us this week, whether it's been listening to me drone on for 75 minutes on solo shows or issues with the website, which affect every sport. Certainly appreciate all the patience that everybody has had. Hopefully we can get the site issues resolved as quickly as we can. But again, above my pay grade, the developers are doing all they can. So it'll get fixed when it gets fixed. But thanks a lot for the super chat, Clayton. I certainly do appreciate it. All right, we are out of here. I think we're going to have a show on Monday. It's a 5-game slate, but it's also Monday Night Football. So we'll see what the contests look like. For sure, we're going to be back Tuesday. We're probably going to be back Monday as well. Let everybody know. Hat trick pick for tonight. Kind of a weird one. Doesn't get power play time, but what the hell? I think it's a pretty good matchup. Alexei Protas from Washington. So that is my hat trick pick. Once again, thanks everybody for all your patience and understanding this week. We'll see everybody, if not on Tuesday, possibly on Monday. Either way, good luck tonight, everyone, and we'll talk to you later.